Everyone, it's Liam here from Rating the Races. So this is part two of the National Hunt horses to follow, and we're going to start with a horse called Delta Work. This is the only horse from the list that actually won at the Cheltenham Festival, um, and I think he'll win again at the Cheltenham Festival in the cross country chase. And I also think he'll go very, very close in the Grand National. He finished third in the Grand National last year, but that came after a really hard run against Tiger Roll on heavy going in the cross country chase. There'll be no Tiger Roll this year in the cross country chase. Excuse me. I think he'll win it comfortably, the cross country chase, and that will just mean he's had an easier race going into the Grand National, which will surely help him. I thought if you actually watch the race, he travelled really well through the Grand National, and then just seemed to empty out maybe just after the second last or coming to the last, which could have been, what the race at Cheltenham did to him. That could have been its mark. Just at the end of the Grand National, he didn't have that extra bit of stamina required to get home, which I think if he has an easier run at the Cheltenham Festival, which I imagine he will without Tiger Roll in the race, I think he'll go very, very close in the Grand National this year. Um, yeah, I'm quite a big fan of his. I hope they don't do a lot with him. I hope they could campaign him like they did Tiger Roll, keep him over hurdles, don't do anything. Even if he drifts for the Grand National, that wouldn't put me off. Um, and for the cross country, turn up at the cross country, and that'd be your first race where you're actually going for it. Win the cross country, and then go to Aintree with a great chance. The second horse I want to talk about is Iscaria 10, who finished ninth in the Grand National, and I just wonder whether this year they might go, he didn't stay the Grand National trip. Let's not bother aiming him at the Grand National. Let's look at something else. I think he's still ahead of his mark because um, his runs, especially behind the likes of Galvin and Next Destination in that 4 miler at the Cheltenham Festival, what was the 4 miler? It was only just under 3 miles 6 when he ran in it. That form is really strong. And I thought his effort at Fairyhouse behind Any Second Now was a good effort. And his effort even in the Thistes chase at the Gowran Park was a really good run. He seemed to come into the race really strongly, and then emptied on his, that was his return after disappointing in the Irish National. This year, I think we might see him running before the Thistes chase in his warm-up race and actually going for the Thistes chase at Gowran. I think if he was fit, he would have gone very, very close in that. So I just wonder whether they might look at a few different handicaps this year with Iscaria 10. Not knocking his effort in the Grand National. I didn't think he stayed. I know he's going to be a bit older, and that might be enough. Obviously, I have seen Paul Nicholls talking about 3 under through 5 being a potential horse for the McNeils. So it'd be interesting to see if they switch and go with that horse. And Iscaria 10 is aimed at some other big handicaps along the way. If he turns up in any of those and it looks like he's going for it, then I think he'll go very, very close. The next horse I want to talk about is a little bit of a tricky one. It's History Bear, and this almost comes from his good run at Cheltenham being why he's made this list. I thought it was a very good run. He finished third behind Cormier and Severance. Now, both of those have done really well since. Severance went on to run some good races at the likes of Aintree and Kelso, whilst Cormier ran well at Cheltenham, at the Cheltenham Festival. Now, History Bear was held up that day, came through, and probably was given too much to do that day against those two. And I just think after that, Sandown didn't work, and Hexham was very disappointing. But it'd be interesting to see if they go back for the likes of the 2 mile handicaps at Cheltenham, particularly the one they finished third in. Why not go back to that, see if they can win that, and then look to the future again. He's very likely to race. We can see he's only had the 7 runs there. He's still only a 5, turning 6. He should be improving. It might have just all happened a bit quick last season after his third at Cheltenham. his next two runs might have been, they could have been too deep for him at that point in his career. So just keep an eye on History Bear, and if he goes in a lower class handicap, the classes that he can run well in, I'd be disappointed if he doesn't go close. The next horse I want to talk about is a Hoisinor, who I believe can win the Gold Cup. The big question mark for me about a Hoisinor, and I think for a lot of people, is his jumping. And yet he looked much better at Aintree. I thought at Cheltenham, if you gave his jumping, if he jumped a clean round, he would have beaten Lompress in the RSA. Now I know you have to jump, and that's almost a silly statement, but he's only got to jump a little bit better, which should come with more experience. And I think he'll go very, very close in the Gold Cup. I think he'll beat Lompress. I think he'd beat Brave Man's Game. I think he would beat who's the other one? It's him, isn't it? I think he'd be the best of the British. It's all about whether he can beat A Plus Tard and Galopin Des Champs. For me, I would actually stick Galopin Des Champs to stick him and keep him over 2.5 mile, because his jumping can also be an issue. And we actually saw that didn't we, at the Cheltenham Festival when he fell unseated at the last. But he's a nutcase, and running over 3 mile 2 might not be his game. For me, that would then mean A Plus Tard is the biggest danger. And I think a Hoisinor might be able to almost run the finish out of A Plus Tard. I think A Plus Tard's got a great turn of foot, but I think a Hoisinor, if a Hoisinor wasn't rated as high as he is, he's rated 161. If he was rated 150, I think this season they'd be going, well, we've got a grand national horse on our hands. But for obvious reasons, they're not. They've got a horse rated 161, and he's a Gold Cup horse. And I think he'll go very, very close in the Gold Cup. And hopefully over the season, his jumping will again improve. The next horse I want to talk about is Honest Vic. Now, when I posted my list or the blog post, I got a message from somebody saying there's some usual names in there, including Honest Vic. Yeah, sorry. I really like Honest Vic, and I don't think he's had the best luck in his races. I thought his race at Cheltenham in the Pertemps final, he finished 5th. Great effort. I thought his jockey went for home far too soon. He's turning into the straight and he's kicking on. Like, just wait. And I think he would have gone very, very close at huge odds. He's moved now to Tom George, and whilst he's 9 turning 10, I think that that will dictate Tom's plans of him. Instead of waiting for a race and trying to get him perfectly lined up for a big handicap such as the Pertemps final, I think they'll go for a race and try and win it. Obviously, he won a Pertemps qualifier back here in October 2020, this race here. That actually came off a £2 higher mark, so he's £2 lower. And if you watch that race, he was really, really impressive in it. And he then ran in a Grade 1 after that. That's how impressive he was. I'd be disappointed if they don't go for that Pertemps qualifier at Cheltenham in October, win it, then they can look at planning around the rest of the season with the Pertemps final in mind. If it doesn't work, then they can keep running him in 3 mile handicaps and trying to pick up 1 or 2 of them, and almost resigning themselves to he is on the decline. I didn't know whether to say decline or downgrade then, but we've gone for decline. But just 2 runs ago, he finished 5th in the Pertemps final. So maybe he's not. Maybe there's still plenty of life left in Honest Vic. Moving on to the next horse, and that's Too Friendly, who is actually down to run or going to run. Let me just quickly check. He was going to run in the 4-year-old handicap at Chepstow, sponsored by Paul Ferguson, who does a brilliant Jumpers to Follow book. Yes, he is going to run in that. Harry Skelton on board. I know last year Dan said whatever he does last season would be a bonus. No, it's not a phrase we really should be using, and I think you might have just lost my picture in the corner, but hopefully you can still hear my voice. I wonder if I do this, whether this will work. There we go, it brought me back. So let's continue about Too Friendly. Whatever he did last year was going to be a bonus. He arrives at Chepstow for his first run of the season. I think he could be ahead of his mark. He's actually rated 125, which is the same as Holly, who was in our other video that also runs this week or this weekend or on Friday. I think Too Friendly will have improved over the summer, and is one that I'm quite keen on following in handicaps. I don't like 4-5-year-olds in graded races. I think they get um, very much overhyped, particularly the Triumph Hurdle horses when they go into open company. But Too Friendly is at least being aimed at a handicap, and obviously rightly so, off 125. And I think he will take all the beating on Saturday if he's fit. If not, I think he'll still run well and then hopefully progress from there for the rest of the season. 4 to go. The next one is Itchy Feet. Now, Itchy Feet went to the sales, and Ollie Murphy really wanted to retain him, and they got him back, and he's now owned by the Nick Brown Syndicate. And I think there's a couple of races for Itchy Feet. I was, I understand why they're not, but I really hoped they would go for the Monet's Garden. This year, £3 lower than when beaten a length by All Mankind. Ollie Murphy said we're not going to do that. They're going to wait another month or so. I think that he's had a slight setback, or that might have been the plan, was just to bring him in later anyway. So I do think there are races with him though over the 2.5 mile trip. Something like the Paddy Power could be where they go. I'd just be looking at where he's got some decent form. It's Sandown, there's form at Kempton, there's form at Haydock, there's form at Aintree. He's gone close. There's form at Ascot. He's gone close in lots of races, and I think he's handicapped nicely. That run him in handicaps off 150. Don't target the graded races where I think he will struggle. But whatever handicaps he turns up in, I think he can go very, very close in. The next horse is Rouge Vif, and do you know what? There's a real race for him that he has to run it. He just has to run in it. It's this one here in October, so in a few weeks. He won this race at 5 to 1. I think he won it by 12 lengths. He won it by 7.5 lengths. Sorry, I'm just reading my notes. 7.5 lengths of 156. He's currently rated 147. He could turn up in that race £9 lower in a race that he won without coming off the bridle, and winning by 7.5 lengths. If that is not the most obvious, surely race to run in, then I don't know. I'd be very, very disappointed if Connections don't run him there, and also shocked. And I'd almost suggest that they've got it wrong. I mean, that looks an obvious race for him. Why would they not run there? Then, you can keep running in those handicaps, and if you're good enough that you then win a couple and go up too high, then you can run in the graded races. But if not, keep him to that 2 mile trip. What you could even do is go for that race at Cheltenham in October, win it. You might go up £5-6. You'd still be lower than when winning that race, Grand Annual. Go back for the Grand Annual then, or go for the Grand Annual and try and win that. Yeah, I think he would go very, very close in those types of races. Keep him in handicaps though. Stop going for the graded races. The penultimate horse is a horse called For Pleasure, who is similar to Rouge Vif. Doesn't quite have the an obvious race like Rouge Vif, but surely he's got to be running in handicaps. He was running in all of the graded races last year, beaten by the likes of Edwardstone, Brave Siaska, Third Time Lucky. He then turned up to the Cheltenham Festival in the Grand Annual, and he was 25 to 1 in the morning, and he went off 7 to 1 after getting absolutely smashed up. A horse who normally goes forward, he then didn't. He missed the break. I think they had a second start. They did a full start and they had to do it again. And when they did it again, his jockey didn't quite get him in the right position, and he was slowly away and never involved. He pulled up. He then went to Aintree, and I think they went back up to Grade 1 company next time out at Aintree. I wondered whether that was part of, we know he's not ready for Grade 1 company. So let's run him in a handicap. Just want to see what this race was about. I can't remember because he's then had a third at. He's had a third this season at Newton Abbot. Hopefully that was just a fitness run. You know, it was quite a disappointing one, to be honest, beaten by Romanor and Colstock. That's not for pleasure for me. I think he's much better than that. Hopefully that was just a fitness run, and if it was and they target a race soon, they could be targeting that 2-mile race at Cheltenham that I think Rouge Vif would take all the beating in if he runs in. But I think there's more to come from For Pleasure. You don't go off 7-1 favourite for, or 7-1, or you might have been second or third favourite for a Grand Annual if there's nothing in your handicap mark. The final horse I want to talk about is Gunsight Ridge, who I know Ollie Murphy's come out and said, I think we left everything at Sandown when he won in January. That said, whilst he disappointed on his return to Sandown when he was third, he then went off 4-1 favourite for the Red Run Handicap Chase at Aintree. He went off the 4-1 favourite for it. Really well supported all through the day, and he disappointed, he pulled up. But I think that again suggests that there's still more in his handicap mark. He was rated 133, or he is rated 133. I know at Exeter they were really disappointed that they got beat, but they got beat by Long Press, which in hindsight was actually a really good run. I think there's still more to come from Gunsight Ridge, and off 133, I think he's going to be rated 140 plus by the end of the season, and hopefully that's a win rather than finishing second in lots of races. Hopefully there's a couple of wins in there on the way. So that's my second lot of horses to follow. I think from this lot, if I had to give you one, I'd say Rouge Vif for that race at Cheltenham, but Delta Work. I really think that this year, if they go for that cross country, and it's a lot easier, he'll run a really big race in the Grand National. So thanks for listening. That's my two groups of horses. Hopefully there's plenty of winners in there.